ever supported raising gas taxes. We need to be lowering energy costs. Part of that is by producing more, of course. And so we're going to be able to get that done. I think that whether Congress would ever do that, I think is probably something that's more of campaign rhetoric. But if that were on my desk, I would sign it.
Let's talk about Social Security. I know this is something that has come up at some of your town halls as people look longer term at this. How do you view the financial security of our Social Security system, and where do the changes have to happen?
Well, first, I think just to point out that senior citizens have earned these benefits. They've been taxed their whole life. Some people, say that these are the same as like entitlement programs or welfare programs, but that's not true. You've been taxed every paycheck you've ever had. You've been taxed for this. So promises made need to be promises kept. It's important that seniors have their Social Security. So for me, you can take that to the bank. That will happen. As governor of Florida, we've got a lot of Social Security recipients. And I think back also to my own family. My grandmother lived till 91. Social Security was her sole source of income. That's not true for every senior, but it is true for a lot. So especially when prices are rising, you get a cost of living adjustment, but that's not enough to handle what's happened with the increase in groceries and all the other attendant costs of just living a decent life. So it's important. I understand that. Now, we need to get interest rates down. We need to get inflation down. That will help the solvency of Social Security. It'll help us service the debt much better. That's important. Now, longer term for people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, that's going to be something that you're just going to have to work with Congress on in a bipartisan way. To say, okay, what do we need to do to strengthen the program for the long term? But I don't support what others have proposed, Nikki Haley and others, to say sometimes reducing Social Security benefits in a high inflation environment. I don't think that makes any sense at all. I think that would be destructive for seniors.
A series of questions here regarding veterans, but then also international affairs. And I told you some of these will be the high heat. This is one from Alan in Atlantic. 2018, you said in an interview that as a legal advisor, you advised commanders at Guantanamo Bay on the legalities of force-feeding inmates who are on hunger strikes. This is considered torture by the UN. Can you expand on your role back then?
Well, first of all, that's just not true. This happens in prisons all the time where people do this. And there's interventions.
Hunger strikes, you mean?
Yeah, there's been interventions that are done just with court approval to keep people alive. So I think that's just something that a lot of the liberal corporate media has tried to spin up to doing that. I can tell you this, just as a young naval officer, when I went down to Guantanamo Bay, I had an image of what was going on down there based on what the media was reporting. When you actually got down there, it was a very professionally run operation. They were following all the available rules. And as somebody that has served in Iraq as well, I can tell you, if you had a choice to be in Gitmo or in like the Fallujah local jail, Gitmo was much, much more humane. So a lot of that stuff, I think, was more of a narrative than anything based in fact.
Several of these want to know specifically when it comes to veterans about the large numbers who are homeless. You are a service member, and clearly we can point to a myriad ways where we have not fully supported veterans when they return home. So maybe first, if you can just go into the homeless side of this, what has to be done on a federal level?
So first, I'm the only veteran running for president. I'd be the first veteran who served in a foreign war elected president since 1988. So veterans issues are close to my heart. These will be top tier issues with me as president. And I don't think we've had a president that's put them front and center the way they should have been in my lifetime. So we will do that. Now, here's the thing. The homeless problem is largely a symptom of the underlying issue that the federal government has not done a good job of servicing veterans' mental health needs. People come back, and I remember being in Iraq and working with Marines and soldiers and Naval Special Warfare folks who had been deployed constantly since 9/11. That's just not normal, especially in an environment where you may be standing a post, seeing people walking in front of you. You don't know who's a terrorist and who's not. Very high stress. You got to make split-second decisions. Of course, you see some of these people were engaged in significant arms fire, IED attacks, you name it. So veterans coming back that have post-traumatic stress, veterans that come back and get involved in substance abuse, that is not something that is unforeseen. War is hell. This is the stuff that happens. So two things. One, as Commander-in-Chief, I'm going to be mindful of the costs of that. I hope to never have to deploy troops. I believe in peace through strength. But if I do, I'm going to be mindful of the costs that go into that, and only if it's in our national interest to do. But we need to do a better job on dealing with the invisible wounds of war. Now, the VA has not done a good job. The VA is a massive bureaucracy. I'm going to fire some of these bad bureaucrats. We're going to bring accountability to the VA, but I don't think a bureaucracy that big ultimately can completely do the job. So what we're going to do is take something that we've done in Florida, a model of enlisting all these different parts of society who want to be helpful. So we have something in Florida called the Care Portal. We're going to have that in the VA. Veteran goes in, maybe they have post-traumatic stress. So yes, the VA can work to service that, but it goes into the portal. You have veterans organizations, charities, businesses, individual volunteers, churches, all plugged into the portal. Somebody, veteran, will have a need. Maybe they have post-traumatic stress. Maybe they got evicted from their apartment. All of a sudden, you'll have a church come and help the veteran. You'll have some of these veterans groups. We have groups in Florida that train service dogs to help veterans with post-traumatic stress. And guess what? The suicide rate goes down dramatically. It may even be something as simple as a veteran is really struggling. Somebody local in the community has agreed to volunteer. Maybe they just go up and say, you know what? Thank you for your service. I care about you. Let me take you to lunch. Talk to me. What's going on? That could be the difference between somebody committing suicide or not. So I think the homeless problem flows out of the problems that we've had with mental health and substance abuse. We're going to have a totally new approach. We're not going to put all our eggs in the bureaucratic basket. We're going to use government to help facilitate these connections to so many great things that are going on in this country. Because I can tell you there are very few communities that I've been to, certainly in Florida, that do not want to help their veterans. Let's harness all that energy so we can actually achieve better outcomes.
One emailed in specifically about veterans benefits, saying that those are not enough and doesn't provide him what he needs. How do you address that? Pretty generic. But.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what. I mean, obviously we have pension benefits that people can earn if they serve 20 years. Obviously, I support that. I think that that's important that we'll be able to do. Some of the health benefits, I think, very well may be inadequate. There's parts of the country where some of the VA system, the veterans give high marks to. There's others where it's not the case. So I don't think it's even throughout the country. But yes, there's when you're willing to put the cloth of your country on, particularly if you're injured and harmed in the process of discharging those duties, we have a responsibility to care for you. I mean, Lincoln, in his second inaugural address, one of the things he pointed out, wasn't a very long speech. He said to take care of those who bore the cost of battle for us, and we have responsibility as a society to do that.
We've had different periods in our history where men and women have signed up to join the military because of something. 9/11, one of the more recent ones from 20 plus years ago. As you have seen across the country, the military is struggling to get younger people to want to sign up, right? So what can change? What can change that?
Well, look, I'm one of the veterans that I had a different path in life planned, and then 9/11 happened, and so I decided that our country was in a conflict, and I needed to raise my hand and serve, and so I volunteered to join. Didn't necessarily make nearly as much money as I would have made if I were doing things in the private sector. Didn't get my schooling paid for, but the satisfaction of wearing the cloth of your country mattered to me. This was during the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts. I volunteered to serve in Iraq. Wasn't necessarily the best conflict in the world at the time. There was a lot of problems going on there, but I felt that you have to stand up and serve. And I know a lot of veterans have felt this way. I think part of the reason why we're struggling, I think it's twofold. I think one is a lot of the political leaders have not done a good job in managing these conflicts. I mean, just think of what happened with Afghanistan. To leave behind billions of dollars worth of weapons and tanks and vehicles, and then to have 13 service members killed, that was humiliating for this country? And what does that message send to people that may be thinking about joining? Because when you join the military, you're writing a check payable for an amount up to and including your life to the United States of America. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where they're going to send you. So I think a lot of the failures there have caused morale to go down and less people. I also think, largely driven by civilians, you have had political agendas imposed in the military, things like woke, social experimentation, all that. That is not what the mission is about. And when people see that they're not putting the mission first, you think, well, that may not be the type of military I want to join right now. And I have veterans coming up to me in Iowa and beyond, and frequently they will say that they're not sure they would advise their kids or grandkids to join the current military. So as commander-in-chief on day one, I'm taking all the political nonsense out of the military. We're going to refocus it on mission first. Promotions are going to be done through merit and achievement. And that's the way it's going to be. That's going to create an increase in morale. And I think more people are going to want to serve. And I'll be very vocal as commander-in-chief and as a veteran that military service is a noble calling. You know, John F. Kennedy said that you can look back on your life with a great deal of pride and say, I served in the United States Navy. And that inspired a lot of people to want to join the Navy. Ronald Reagan said that some people spend a lifetime wondering if they've made a difference. U.S. Marines don't have that problem. And that's inspiring when you hear the commander-in-chief talk about what it means to wear the cloth of your country. So you can count on me to do that.
We do not have troops who have responded to Russia's attack in Ukraine. Ian from Sergeant Bluff messaged in that the U.S. does not need to be involved in Ukraine. This is something Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa has talked about and pushed back against, explaining why to her it is in the vital interest to stop Putin's attack. I know this is a topic that comes up in town halls when you take questions from folks. How do you explain to people why the U.S. has to be involved in this?
Well, look, I don't think as I'm president, you will not see any U.S. troops in Ukraine. I think that that's the way, unfortunately, it's heading. I don't think Biden would do that before the election. And I think there are other candidates running on the Republican side that may be willing to do that out there. I would not do that. I mean, I think that we have to look to see what is the vital interest, what's a secondary interest. And the way I look at it is Russia's primary threat is to the European countries. And yet some of these European countries aren't doing anything significantly to help. Some are, Poland, Finland, some others, but they should all be doing 2.5% of their GDP, our NATO allies, for their defense. We're in a situation where we face one peer competitor, and that peer competitor is China. And so my national security strategy is going to focus on making sure that we deter Chinese ambitions in the Indo-Pacific. That's going to require more naval strength. It's going to require us to be able to project more power in the Indo-Pacific. And yes, that's a strategy to deny them the ability to do things like invade Taiwan. But even beyond that, because they want to break out of that first island chain and dominate in the Indo-Pacific. I don't think you can spend hundreds of billions of dollars in Europe and also do what you need to do. So when I get in, yeah, Europe's going to be told some hard truths. You guys have to step up. You guys are going to have to get the job done. But I'd also think about some of the things that they've said, because, you know, you have some politicians saying, you know, Ukraine needs some more ammunition, some of these other things. But if you look at the amount of money total that's gone, most of that is non-military. They've sent your tax dollars to pay salaries for bureaucrats in Ukraine. They actually sent your money to pay pension payments for retired government workers in Ukraine. How is that America's responsibility, especially when we have our own southern border that's sitting wide open? So I think the two top security threats to this country is the rise of China and our own southern border. As Commander-in-Chief, I will deal with both of those starting on day one.
You mentioned education earlier, and we have several questions about education. One comes from Terry in Sioux City, and she's talking about education on a national level here. I understand that the Department of Education is a huge bureaucracy, in her words. Since its inception, U.S. test scores have plummeted. What's the solution here?
Well, the solution, Terry, is to recognize that the Department of Education has failed and to eliminate it and restore power to states and localities. Fact of the matter is, in Florida, we've leaned in on all these issues. We now rank third and fourth, respectively, in fourth grade reading and fourth grade math. We're a big, diverse state, and yet we have more school choice than anywhere in the country. We've got charter schools, we've got private schools, scholarships. We have scholarships for students with unique abilities, and even our public school districts have choice programs within those. That's the type of innovation we should want to spur. Unfortunately, the Biden administration uses the federal government and the federal Department of Education to try to fight back against states that are doing what their people want. For example, I signed legislation in Florida ensuring that our girls and women athletes can compete with fairness and integrity without having men injected into their competition. Biden administration opposed that. They want to have boys competing against the girls, and they were going to they tried to take away school lunch money from poor kids because we were protecting women's sports. So I think the whole U.S. DOE has been a big failure. I think what they've done in K-12 has not worked, and I think that we need a new approach.
If you do abolish it and push a lot of this back to the states, what happens, for example, with testing? How do we measure one state versus another? How do you know if your state's doing well?
Well, you do that. I mean, so for example, the NAEP exam, the nation's report card, that's administered on a state basis. So we do it. You absolutely can do that. The NAEP results in Florida, you saw the effect of school choice and the effect that we had kids in school during COVID when California and New York, some is not. They had huge learning loss as a result of what they did. Florida in fourth grade reading, fourth grade math had its best performance ever.
All right, we're in our final 10 minutes, so I'm going to bounce all over the place. We have a lot of many unrelated questions. Stacy from Sioux City has a very direct question, but perhaps get at the core of anybody running for this office. As simple as possible here. What is your main reason why you want to be president?
Well, Stacy, we're in jeopardy of being the first generation of Americans to leave to our kids and grandkids in America less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. If that happens, we'd be the first generation of Americans to do that. I am not going to stand idly by and watch the managed decline of this country. And I'm running for president because we need to reverse this country's decline. We need a new birth of freedom, and we need to usher in a revival of the American spirit. And I'm the leader that can get the job done.
All right. Terry wants to know the 3 strengths you feel that you uniquely bring to this race.
Well, thanks. I think that's a great question. I mean, one, I think the fact that I'm a veteran. I think we need another veteran as president. We haven't had one in a while. I think that's really, really important. 2, I have a record of achievement that's second to none. If you look in Florida, all my promises I delivered on 100%. We were able to defeat the left, defeat the teachers union, defeat George Soros, defeat the ACLU, the Dems, all this stuff on all these key issues. You need somebody that has that proven record. And then I think having leadership and judgment and an ability to actually articulate a vision and bring that in. I showed an ability to do that in Florida through some pretty turbulent times. If you look at COVID-19, governors have not been tested like that in our lifetimes. Some failed. In Florida, we really set the standard for how we handled that, and now our state is doing better than others. But leadership, it's not about entertainment. Leadership's not about showmanship. Leadership is ultimately about producing results for the people that you represent. And I had to make decisions during COVID that put the interests of my people, their jobs, and their freedom over my own personal political interests, because I was getting hammered all the time for a lot of the decisions I was made to buck conventional wisdom. And I was perfectly willing to let the political chips fall where they may, because I had to stand up for those folks. So I'll be a president that will fight for you. And it's one thing to say that when the wind's at your back. It's much more difficult to do that when they're shooting at you and slinging arrows at you. You can count on me, though. When the chips are down and you need someone standing up for you, I'll be the guy to do that.
We've had a bunch of questions that have talked about polls. And as you know, we talked before this started tonight that this was not going to be a bunch of inside baseball poll questions. So I will just phrase one in this way, which is a little indelicate perhaps, but for some of these people who are trying to find the distinction between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, when someone calls you and accuses you of trying to be Trump light, how do you respond to that?
if you look at what happened with what we've done in Florida, I've delivered on policies that conservatives and Republicans have wanted for years, even before Donald Trump was ever even a Republican, much less was president of the United States. And, I have a lifetime of service to this country. I have a lifetime of record of putting service above self. Who else takes, I had degrees from some of the most prestigious universities in the country. I could have made a lot of money doing a lot of different things, and yet I volunteer to serve in Iraq and join our military. Not a lot of people do that who end up running for office. So we have a record of putting the country first, putting your interest before my own interest, and actually delivering on all these results. I mean, with all due respect to Donald Trump, he's running in 2024 on a lot of the same things that he promised in 2016 and didn't deliver. And had he delivered on building the border wall, Biden would not have been able to bring in this many millions of illegal aliens, because the wall's a physical fact of life. That's why we supported that. So I think if you look at how we've delivered in Florida, the record is second to none. And I think those people who say things like that, I don't even know that they know they're talking about. And oh, by the way, who's the number one guy that all these people have been going after, spending $40 million? Trump and Haley have spent all the money attacking me because they see me as the threat. And a lot of people in Washington see me as the threat. A lot of the New York and D.C. corporate media outlets have been gunning for me from day one, trying to do anything they can to do, because I think they know if nominated, I will win. But even more important than that, when I get to Washington, there'll be a new sheriff in town. We need a change agent in D.C. We can't just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic.
All right, we're down to our last couple of minutes, so I have to smash a couple of questions together, but and it's a serious matter. It involves faith here, so it may be indelicate to do that. But how does faith guide you, and give people an example of where you relied on that and made a decision as governor because of that? But then the other side of that from these folks is, how do you make sure that there exists a separation between church and state, essentially?
Well, faith in God is just who I am, and my faith is my foundation. It's how I am able to deal with issues when the seas are choppy, when people are gunning for you. I put on that full armor of God, and that allows me to have the strength to be able to lead. We saw this when my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer. Major thing. I mean, our kids were 4, 3, and 1 at the time. And we didn't know, what was going to happen. The prayers we got from people, not just in Florida, but throughout the country, lifted her spirits. It lifted our family spirits in a way that was really powerful. And I'm a firsthand believer in the power of prayer. And as governor, I think I would not have been able to stand strong during COVID, during some of the fights we had where we beat Disney on the transgender ideology, keeping that out of the schools and the elementary schools, because you got a lot of people that gun for you. And so I think having that faith, the faith in God, really gives you the foundation where you're standing strong for what's right. Now, in terms of how that relates beyond that, I mean, we're a diverse country. I mean, just in Iowa, I've gone to a number of different denominations, and they all have, great traditions. And that's, government needs to be neutral amongst that. I mean, there's not going to be an established denomination versus others, but we are a country that is based on the idea that our rights come from God, not from the government. That's in the Declaration of Independence. And you absolutely have a right to not just go to church on Sunday and practice your faith there, but to live your faith in what you do in your daily lives. We're going to make sure that we restore religious liberty in this country, because when you have situations where a football coach like Coach Kennedy is losing his job in Washington State because he led a voluntary prayer at midfield after a high school game, he has to go all the way to the Supreme Court. That is not what our founding fathers intended. They absolutely intended that your faith would be an important part of who you are, and that you have a right as a free citizen to live that out to the fullest.
A handful of questions looking beyond the primary, looking to you becoming the nominee. I know you haven't talked specifically at people's names as far as running mates, I don't believe, but can you talk about the type of person, qualities you would need for a team?
Yeah, look, I think that I have two main qualities
If you want to
that
drop names, do that too if you like.
that are non-negotiable. One, the individual has got to be able to be president if it comes to that. And there should be no question. I'm partial to governors because I think governors have the best training in terms of actually having to make executive decisions and then also working with the legislative branch to be able to advance policy. The second thing is it's got to be somebody that shares our vision, because what you don't want to have happen is put someone on the ticket. We run on a certain vision for this country. God forbid something happens to me, and then the person that fleets up ends up going in a different direction than what the voters voted for. So I think those two are non-negotiable, and I think those are much more important than some of the other political considerations that get thrown out. You need somebody that could do the job and somebody that shares your values.
All right, we have half a minute left. The successful caucus candidates in Iowa history always have what is essentially a bumper sticker message that folks think about when they show up, and this time it'll be January 15th. Usually reflects kind of what their theme, what their mission is. What's your bumper sticker message about why you and not somebody else?
Very simple. Donald Trump is running on his issues. Nikki Haley is running on her donors' issues. I'm running on your issues, your family's issues, and turning this country around. That'll be my sole focus. It's not about me. Got a lot of humility in doing this. As a leader, I'm just a vessel for your hopes, dreams, and aspirations. I will get the job done for you.
Governor Ron DeSantis, first candidate to sit down in this statewide conversation. We appreciate safe travels.
Yeah.
January 15th, caucus night, and stay with us, stay tuned. We'll tell you when we have the next candidate slotted for this, but we are now down to just 13 days. So stay tuned. Candidate slotted for this, but we are now down to just 13 days. So stay tuned.